Yeah, okay, so to those victim blamers. Number one, people live van life all the time. Go on YouTube, look it up. People buy vans, for 5K or whatever, or less, and remodel it and live in their vans all the time. People do it. It's a way of life. It's still breaking and entering. It's still illegally drugging. It's still rape. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. If a man lived in his van and got broken into and drugged and raped in his sleep, would you say that to him? First of all. Second of all, and I know most of the people watching this would never say something like that, but I just have to air it all out there. These rapists who broke in are the ones who broke the law. Who broke into my car and raped me in my sleep are the ones who broke the law. Second of all, people are allowed to have different... I found this too throughout all of this. And before, small-minded people, when they see someone who has a different way of life than them, they immediately persecute, and I don't do that, and I know a lot of good people who don't do that. Just because somebody has a different way of life from you doesn't mean they're automatically suspicious, and doesn't mean that they deserve bad things that happen to them. I've shared before, throughout all this, I've met people who were victim to the exact same thing that I've been, being drugged and raped in their sleep, who lived in an apartment the whole time, So no, it's not about the fact that I was in my car. My car is what I had. It was mine, y'all don't know what led to me being in my car. Y'all don't know the conditions of my life. I've had a hard life, I know a lot of people have, but I'm not going to get into all that, and I was taking every step that I needed to have something of my own, so I don't have to pay rent the rest of my life, right? Like that was my lifestyle and where I was at in my life, and I had a chance to own properties, and I took that chance to invest and try to have my own business. People are allowed to be in transitional stages of their lives. People are allowed to have different ways of life. Entrepreneurs have a different way of life than the majority of people, and I was an entrepreneur. This whole thing has put a huge wrench in that. But yeah, no, it doesn't. What was my crime, right? My crime was being female and being at the wrong place at the wrong time in a town that I've now found that it was going to be inevitable to some extent that pimps were going to plot on me. This town was 80% Medicaid. It's 80% Medicaid. The economy there sucks. And come to find, I had no idea, these organized criminal organizations and this organized criminal syndicate flourishes in a town like that. The police force is very small. More on that later. This is where these people go to flourish. So it was going to be inevitable, especially being in a place that sexist. I haven't gotten into just how sexist rural Texas is. More on that later throughout all this. But it's absolutely horrible. So yeah, my crime was being female and being a single female. By that point, he knew I owned property. That didn't stop him from plotting on me and raping me in my sleep. Or organizing, being responsible for my rape. So I really want to make that point and drive it home. It's not about the fact that I was living a mobile lifestyle, sleeping in my car some nights. No, it's not about that, because now I've been broken into in multiple places, not in my car. That was the only time that this happened in my car. Now I've been broken into and raped in a lot of different places. that were not cars. It's not about the fact that I was in my car, and that's victim blaming. As soon as I was suspicious, I left and got away from this. And, up until that point, I dodged so many others' attempts to do this same thing to me or similar. It's not about me. It's about these organized criminal syndicates, pornography, how profitable sex trafficking is, and the sexism that's perpetuated by all those other things. And I just want to say that that's not a political stance on my part. I was not interested in any of that. I literally was just trying to have my business and have a home for myself. Me saying all that stuff, it's not a bias. It's not a political point. It's literally the truth. There's a lot of women online who give advice on, okay, if you're traveling alone, wear a fake ring, stuff like that. Those are all great ideas, and that's why I didn't tell people about my property. That kind of thinking, you don't have to be an open book. Because people do take advantage of women, single women. You don't have to tell everybody all your business. Unfortunately, yes, the majority of people are good, but the bad ones are bad enough that you have to take steps. And looking back, just the fact that I was a single woman who was not in my hometown was enough for this syndicate to make me a target of theirs. Anyways, that night I had a dream. Okay, so I wake up the next day, okay, whatever, it's fine. Because again, to me it was still a dream. To me it had been a sex dream from my experience of it. To me it had been 5 seconds of a sex dream that what I remembered was a man in a black mask. Raping me in the backseat of my car. But while it was happening, it felt like a dream. It felt like a sex dream. So that next day, because I was wearing that red dress that I fell asleep in. I fell asleep in that red dress. And so then the next day, April 19th, I obviously spent that day driving from where I had slept that night to continue on my journey back to North Carolina. I wasn't 100% sure what I was going to do yet, but I knew I was going to stay home for a little bit. So, driving back home, and, again, I don't realize I've been raped yet. To me, that was just a dream, right? People have sex dreams all the time. It doesn't mean that you've been raped and it's real, right? If you have a sex dream, do you wake up and say, oh shit, that really happened? No, you don't. Especially not when you've been drugged so that you don't even remember any of it. I think I was probably not supposed to remember any of it, and the fact that I do remember 5 seconds of it is hugely significant and sets me apart. I'm very interested in what other victims of the same thing have to say about that. About that specific piece of this, about the memory thing and the dream thing. I've spoken to other victims about that part of it, but not as in depth. So, while I'm on that drive, at this point, I know something's up with this guy, Gil. I don't know exactly what it is. I'm spending this time driving thinking about every interaction I had with him. Still not sure what's happening for sure. But it's on my mind heavy. that night, the night of April 19th, so like around midnight, I stopped. I was in Georgia. So like driving from Texas to North Carolina, obviously Georgia is part of that route. Okay, pause. I want to make one other point here. So I knew something was up at this point. Wasn't 100% sure what. You know, him taken in conjunction with the fact that when I drove past his house, as soon as I made that turn onto his road, when I left that note the night of April 18th, as soon as I made that left turn onto that road, there was a car right behind me. I immediately got my instincts got going like, you know, this isn't just a coincidence. Because that car had stopped across the street as soon as I stopped. So that, taken in conjunction with what he had told me about himself, was enough for me to be way suspicious now, even though I did not yet realize I had been raped the night of April 18th in my car. Another pause, sorry I forgot to mention this, is that of the like 5 seconds I remember of that first rape, when I was wearing that red dress the night of April 18th, 2023, in the backseat of my car, there's like literally half a second where it feels like I know someone else was there. Whoever raped me was not Gil. I remember his body type because he had no shirt on. He was fat and had like a really round belly, black mask on, like not just like a ski mask. It was like some fucking weird fetish, like what's that called? Spandex maybe, type of black plasticky mask with some kind of breathing mechanism. His whole face was covered. Like, obviously he did that so that he would not be able to be identified for the crime of raping me. But part of that, I know for a fact that there was someone else present standing outside of the car. Because part of the 5 seconds I remember is both of them making a loud noise, like a cheering sort of noise, and a flash of light. Again, I had not revisited that memory yet at this point on April 19th. When I say revisit the memory, that's very hard. Other victims will know what I'm talking about. I'm going to get into that later. I didn't realize that. But what I do remember of that first rape on April 19th, morning of April 19th, night of April 18th, morning of April 19th, so, you know, whatever, at 4 a.m., someone in a hoodie videoing, because it was a bright light. It was a bright flash. So what else would that bright flashlight would have been but a video? And I believe that it was Gil standing outside videoing me. I'm not sure. I think it was. Okay, continue. So, stop in Georgia at a Love's truck stop. Obviously, I stopped there to take showers when I was traveling like this. I'm sorry, y'all. My head hurts really bad, so please bear with me. So again, I already knew something was going on, but I didn't know what. I still didn't know I had been raped. So, you know, okay, so this guy approaches me after I'd been sitting there, just sitting in the parking lot for, you know, whatever, 10 minutes or 20 minutes. And he tells me his name is Israel, and he has dreads, black guy with dreads, in a red van, somewhere in Georgia. He tells me his name's Israel. He's like, do you need anything? And I was like, oh, I could use $17 for a shower. Because he approached me and he asked. But the extremely important part about this is that I wouldn't usually... Unfortunately, I've had this detail used against me, which is such bullshit. But I didn't know what was going on yet. Y'all have to understand that I didn't know what was going on yet, so I needed to investigate. Because I'm like, okay, you know, if something is going on, if this is organized crime, then that does mean that they're going to send people to me, right? So, yeah, stopped at the Loves. I'm sorry, y'all. He's like, oh, do you need anything? I was like, I could use $17 for a shower. You know, to me, this is a random guy, but I'm not sure. And he gives me $17, and then he's like, whatever, like making normal conversation, but I already got a creepy vibe from him, so I did not stay for long at all. He was like, oh, how long you been driving? And I was like, oh, you know, I came from Texas. I already had Texas plates at that time, so obviously I have to tell the truth about that. Came from Texas, and I'm going to Colombia. Because, of course, again, I had already learned to not tell the truth to random men. And women shouldn't have to do that, but, you know, you should be allowed to be social or whatever, but, you know better. I was like, I'm driving to Columbia, South Carolina. And whatever, he said, he was like, oh, well, I just won big. He was like, happy 420, because it had just been April 19th, and it was midnight, so it was 420. And he was like, oh, well, if you want to come smoke some weed with me at this hotel, I just won $2,400 at bingo. I was like, I don't smoke weed, I don't do drugs. And so I was like, absolutely not, you know. As I'm walking away, as soon as he said that, I'm like, all right, it's time for me to go, because it's like, what the fuck? Why would you just tell me you won $2,400? Like, that sounds like a lure. That's obviously a lie. It sounds like, oh, here's this money, come, like, what the fuck? No. So as I'm walking away, after I've talked to him for maybe about not even 2 minutes, he's like, oh, so, when do you think you'll be in Charlotte? And I was like, I immediately said, Charlotte? I'm not going to Charlotte, I'm going to Columbia, South Carolina. So I had like a psychological, let's take a note on that in the back of my head. And then I was like, I walked away, and as I'm walking away, I'm like, congrats on your 2,400. I yelled it across the parking lot as if to say, leave me the fuck alone, you liar. Another thing he said to me was, oh, you look like you're 16 years old. I was like, no, I don't. Stop trying to flatter me. Just an all over. Y'all have to understand that men approached me all the time, and I would always just totally ignore them in this random kind of setting. I always just ignored them to the point that I was always labeled a bitch, whatever, you know, which is fine. This one time, though, I did, because y'all have to understand, I already have so little evidence. It wasn't even about evidence at that point. It was about me knowing what the fuck was going on. Because I already had a feeling that I had been followed the night of April 18th when I drove past his house to leave that note on the front porch. But I needed to know for myself what the hell was going on and what am I dealing with. Who is after me right now, you know, like, so again, this is still the time that I'm not sure. Only reason I even talked to that guy was to try to see and glean some kind of information about what's going on. So I walk in to the Loves, and I'm like, okay, you know, I was like, you know, leave me the fuck alone. And then I go in the shower. It's probably 10 minutes later, and I'm thinking, Charlotte, like, how did he know I was going to Charlotte, you know? Because I still don't know that this guy is part of some organized criminal syndicate that Gil is a part of. And I'm like, okay. At first I'm like, okay, was my GPS on my phone, like, did he look into my car and see the GPS on my phone? But I had already had the GPS. I spent like 2 or 3 minutes wondering if it had been that. But I was like, no, because I already had it closed out. I was already like sitting there on my phone for 20 minutes. So it wasn't that. And I'm like, how the hell did this guy know Charlotte? Like, I didn't have North Carolina license plates. So, the fact that he knew I was, eventually in that shower, I came to the conclusion, or maybe it was a little after the shower, I don't know, but I'm trying to give y'all an understanding for how long it's taking me to put the pieces of this together as they're rapidly developing. I'm like, all right. He knew I was from Charlotte because it's got something to do with Gil. Because Gil definitely knew I was from Charlotte. And of course, I had just blocked his number, and that had been the last, you know, person I had talked to in that town. So I knew, taken with everything else, with the picture and the fact that he was born into an organized crime family, I'm like, I knew something was up. Whatever, I'm sorry, I know I'm over-explaining. So, okay, and then I'm like, okay, but here's the thing is, how did this guy, okay, so if he is connected to Gil, that means I'm dealing with a nationally organized crime group, first of all. Second question is, why would he follow me here? Why would they send this Israel guy to me in Georgia? Well, that can partially be answered with, because somebody wanted to pimp me out, clearly, or he wouldn't have offered to smoke weed with me in a hotel. Of course not, absolutely not. Third and most important question at that time was, how the hell does he know where I am? I'm in a random, you know, I had blocked Gil's number, was never going to talk to him again, and I'm in a random Loves in Georgia. So at that point, I'm like, you know, in those few hours, I'm like, okay, there's gotta be something to this, to me being tracked. Because how else? I know there's a connection to Israel and Gil, because there's no other way that Israel would know that I'm from Charlotte. And I spent a couple minutes considering, like, have I ever met this guy before? How else would he know I'm from Charlotte? No, never met him before whatsoever. No other connection possible. I'm sorry, on my head. I dressed, after that shower, I put on the black long sleeve shirt and like the elephant pants, whatever. So like a lot of this I'm remembering in terms of what outfit I was wearing, because the whole thing is so fucking hectic and terrible. So at that point, I'm like, I leave that Love's, I walk out of that shower knowing what I know now, and I'm like, okay. Something told me not to go back to sleep. Because I'm like, okay, I'm being tracked somehow. I didn't know how yet. But the fact that Israel wouldn't have known that I was headed to Charlotte any other way except through Gil told me that I was being tracked. There's no other way that this guy would have come up to my little old car in the Love's parking lot in Georgia. There's no other way except that I was being specifically and precisely tracked. So I decided to take it slower. I stayed in Georgia for quite a few hours, just in my car, not really knowing what to do yet, because you gotta understand that I know, at that point, first of all, I don't even realize I've been raped yet. Second of all, I know I don't have enough to go to the police yet, because I don't even know what's going on, right? So I stayed in Georgia, drove to a gas station, bought some food, and I'm literally just spending all my time thinking what's going on, like going through every possibility, recalling every single interaction to put everything together. So the next day, while I'm still wearing that black long sleeve shirt and those elephant burgundy hippie pants or whatever, I stopped at another gas station. It was the afternoon this time. And now my alert is up, right? Now I'm paying attention. Like, what the hell is going on here? So I went into the gas station, made my purchase, went to the restroom. And when I walked out, I noticed there was a bald black lady, black female, probably my age, maybe a little bit older, looking at me pretty closely. I had bought a Black and Mild. This other guy approached me, and he was like, "Oh, are you from here?" Bingo. I already knew something was up with that, because it means that it's based on what information who had, right? So if their whole thing is to approach their victims trying to flatter them, like Israel had done when he told me I looked 16, then that means this guy's got to be connected too. So I already knew something was up. He was a Hispanic male, probably 40, 45. And he just approached me like that, and I was like, "Oh, do you have a lighter?" Because at this point, I'm just observing what's going on here so that I can collect the information for my own self to know what I'm up against. Which I'm glad I did that. I'm totally glad I did that. Otherwise, I would have just been raped in my sleep again and not even known what was going on, right? So I'm glad I slowed down and did this. Unfortunately, this has been used against me. People have used the fact that I didn't sleep during that period against me. And to that I would say, what the hell would you have done if you had been raped in your sleep and you were being tracked? Or at the time I wasn't 100% sure yet, but I'm glad I did that. I prevented my own rape by doing that. So fuck off if you're trying to make some argument that I would never just go without sleep for no reason. I was making a cross-country trip back to my hometown for my own safety, and had to pause in the middle of it because I realized that I was being tracked. And like anyone who realizes they're being tracked or has significant reason to believe they're being followed, I took pause and took my safety seriously. Anyways, sorry. So I was like, oh, like, do you have a lighter? And he's like, oh, I'll go find one. So he like went, I'm like still standing there, you know, just observing. I'm observing the fact that black female, she's looking at me a lot, actually. She's just sitting in her driver's seat looking at me. And then that Hispanic male comes back and he's like, oh, I found a lighter. You know, he holds it up and he lights my black and white. I'm like, thank you so much. I walk to my car. We're in broad daylight. But you gotta understand, these people are sneaky. I walk to my car and I open the door to get back into it. And as I'm opening the door, I see this guy go to lean as if to try to put something behind my driver's seat, like under my driver's seat. And as soon as I noticed that, you know, I didn't see exactly him doing that. Like, you know, I noticed that that's what was going on. You know, it's like a periphery kind of vision kind of thing. And of course it sets your alarm off because who the fuck does that? You never experienced that in normal life. I hadn't experienced anything like that. Even living a mobile lifestyle as I did at that time. So as soon as I saw that, I slammed my door shut. As soon as that bald black female who had been sitting in that sedan staring at me this whole time saw me do that, she drove off immediately. So that told me that number one, that black female and that Hispanic male were in some kind of collusion with each other. Number two, they had just approached me, and so that's got to have something to do with Israel. Again, stuff like this never happens to me. Like, not only am I extremely cautious, but all this is connected because it's literally been a day and a half. It's literally been a day and a half since I left Stanford, Texas, and blocked this guy's number. And, nothing like this ever happened. Like, this type of being approached does not happen to me. And like, so I was like, okay, what the hell's going on? There's some kind of crime going on here, because what was he trying to put in my car? And why was Israel asking when I'm going to be in Charlotte? I'm like, are they trying to make a mule out of me or something? That's what was going through my head. So I was like, okay. So, you know, I finally made it home to Charlotte. Went to a couple of different places to visit family. On that drive of finally making it home to Charlotte, I started thinking about how I was possibly being tracked. And what it matched up with what I knew about stuff like this. And I also thought back to the times that I had spent socializing with Gil. That second time when I was like in his living room, he had this dog, and he was like, oh, I'm taking my dog out. Now remember I said it was significant that he had asked me to pull my car into the driveway of the house. So I was just sitting on the couch, and I had been in like my chill mode, his couch, and I had been in my chill mode just watching the TV while my laundry was being done. He was like, oh, I'm just gonna take my dog out real quick, you know. Of course he's not gonna say, don't come out here with me, because that's too obvious. This is a skilled trafficker. This is a skilled pimp who knows psychologically how to not put one's guard up, right? Psychologically, they know how to provide cover for their actions. The dog was a cover. in general. It was a number one, a cover to get my guard down, just like his demeanor was. Number two, specifically, I thought back to that and I said, okay, there's a tracking device on my vehicle. I thought back to everything else I knew about stuff like this, and did some research, some novel research. Because it's like, okay, if there's a tracking device on my vehicle, then how did it get on my vehicle? And so I thought back to that. Like, did he ever have a chance to put a tracking device on my vehicle? And I thought back to that and I thought, yeah. Like, you know, he's not going to just come up to my car while it's parked at the Allsup's or something. That's way too obvious, way too risky. It was when he took the dog out. And that's why he asked me to pull it into the driveway. Because for him to like go run under my car to put a tracking device on it while it's out in the middle of the road, that's too much of a risk of the neighbors seeing something suspicious. So at that point, I knew I was being tracked via a tracking device on my vehicle. Somebody else I had already had an experience where somebody else tried to put a tracking device on my vehicle and my phone gave me a notification of it. That had been months and months before this had happened. And he had actually asked me about that. Gil had asked me about that. I can't remember who had brought it up first, but he was like, oh, so has anyone ever tried to put a tracking device on your vehicle? Like, I think we were talking about like the fact that I had had some bad experiences with stalking. And he was like, oh, you know, has someone ever tried to put a tracking device on your vehicle? And I was like, yeah, you know. And anyways, so it was a matter of me putting together the types of tactics being used by these type of organizations and pimps and what's going on here. I'm sorry, y'all, my head's hurting really bad. So yes, by that time I knew, and I also thought back to other things too. Like, after the second time I hung out with him, I realized now that he had a tracking device on my vehicle. After that, of course, I had no idea. But I was thinking back to, like, I had gone to another city to visit family, and I was headed back to Texas. This was like a couple days before April 18th, actually. I was headed back to Texas, and as soon as I was back in Texas, he had sent me a message like, oh, when are you gonna be back? Looking back, this organized criminal syndicate was tracking my location, so they already knew I was on my way back. They already knew I was back in Texas, and that's why he asked that at that specific time. There was a lot more of me like going back through the data in my brain about every experience I had had with him and every single conversation I had had with him, to the point that I was 100% sure that it was connected to him. By the time I got back in Charlotte, I still didn't realize I had been raped, but I knew for a fact I was being followed. Because remember, at that time, I'm like, okay, what was he trying to put in my car? Like, that was my focus. To me, that rape dream had still been a dream. So to me, at that time, I was being followed for whatever reason that Hispanic man in Georgia was trying to put something in my car. I went to my grandparents' house, and my, this is all new to me. My alarm system, my survival system, was definitely activated in the way that anyone's would be. Anyone who's taken pause to put all this together would be. Anyone who's being stalked by what's clearly a criminal group of people would be, right? So don't turn that around on me like I'm wrong for having my alarm up. No, I'm not trying to brag, but I do have the instincts of a police officer and the investigative skills of one. And if you think about why, it's because I've been out here on my own, responsible for my own safety. So I pick up and observe things in those interests. I decided I'm not gonna stick around here, and I was already scared at that point. I was like, what if they try to break into my car? Clearly I'm being tracked, which means I was tracked back to my grandparents' house. What if they try to break into my car? I want nothing to do with anything like this. Nothing. So I got in my car and I left. I said, okay, I need to, whatever this is, that night I decided I'm going to reorient my whole life. That would have been the night of April 20th. Also, so that was the night of April 20th. I said, okay, whatever's going on here, it's totally unlike anything that I've ever even come into contact with by any means. And I need to take some drastic measures. Because what I had already put together at that point was already a federal thing, right? Because I've already traveled for my own safety back to my hometown and clearly been victimized throughout my own independent travel. My own independent legal travel across state lines. So it was already a big deal, and I said, okay, I need to take some drastic measures. This guy is connected with some criminal organization, the likes of which I've never seen, and which I want absolutely nothing to do with, and I'm going to go out of my way to make sure I have absolutely nothing to do with. So I said to myself, how can I make sure that this never interferes with my life? And I said, okay, well, I kind of feel like I shouldn't live in Stanford, Texas. If this guy, clearly there's more than just him connected to this in that town. And clearly this is some, at that point I'm thinking drug trafficking. What else would they have been trying to put in my car? And I was thinking I don't want to even just leave my car in my grandparents' driveway for them to break into or whatever. I don't know what these people are capable of. Of course, I've already told all this to the appropriate authorities. I'm saying this from my perspective now. I've already gone back and told all these details to the appropriate authorities. So I'm okay, okay, let me reorient my life. Let me most likely not have anything to do with Stanford, Texas. So I started heading back. I was literally scared that I had a reasonable fear that somebody was going to break into my car, or I didn't want anything to do with any type of crime at all, so I didn't want to give anyone the chance to do anything. So I started driving back on the night of April 20th, morning of April 21st, 2023. Now that I had for sure put together that there was definitely a tracking device on my vehicle, I started driving back to Texas because I said to myself, okay, because I had that building in Texas and I needed to, first of all, I felt like it would be most appropriate to go to the authorities in Texas because I already knew that this was going to be a lot. So that's, well, maybe that's not first, but that was in the back of my mind. And then also I knew that I had all that stuff in that building. So I'm like, okay, if I'm going to just give up that I was making payments on that building. I didn't totally own it yet. So like, okay, if I'm going to have them come repo this building, I need to at least get my stuff out of it, like my clothes, all the documents and deeds to my land, everything I owned was in that building. So I was like, I need to at least, I didn't work all this time. It was really about the documents. Like, I might have never even gone back to Texas if it hadn't been for the fact that my documents were inside that building. All the deeds to my properties were in that building. The rest of it